Errol is a young boy living in a fantasy world where everyone receives a blessing from the goddess in the form of a class. This class decides their future job and fighting style, and it's revealed to them when they turn 10 years old. Today is Errol's big day. He's just turned 10 and is on his way to receive his class. His parents and his sister are buzzing with excitement, imagining all the cool, powerful classes he might get. Errol, on the other hand, looks strangely calm and uninterested in the whole system. After breakfast, the family heads to the church. Inside, a priest stands by the altar, performing the ceremony and placing his hand on each child's forehead to read their class. One by one, kids are told what they'll become. Some are blessed as blacksmiths, others as chefs, and a few lucky ones get combat-related classes. Errol's sister leans toward him and whispers that parents' classes affect their children's blessings too. With a mother who is a sword saint and a father who is an archmage, Errol has to get something amazing, right? When Errol's turn comes, he steps up to the priest. The crowd begins murmuring excitedly. A child of a sword saint and an archmage? Surely a legendary class is about to appear. The priest, just as curious, presses his hand to Errol's forehead and waits for the divine revelation. Nothing happens. The priest frowns, tries again, still nothing. After a long, awkward silence, his expression twists into pity. He finally looks Errol in the eyes and announces that Errol was born without a class. Days pass. Errol's parents try to cheer him up, telling him he doesn't need to worry about work. He can just live at home forever if he wants. But Errol isn't actually that upset. He calmly tells them that he's been practicing swordsmanship since he was a kid. He trains every day under his absurdly strong mom. Sure, having a swordsman class would have made things easier, but even without it, he believes he can carve out a place in the world using nothing but hard work and technique. His family is relieved to see he hasn't broken down. Errol heads out alone and eventually hears shouting from the training grounds. Curious, he goes to look. There, he sees two boys sparring with wooden swords. Their basics are shaky, but just having the swordsman class gives them a noticeable boost. They spot Errol watching and sneer at him, asking why a classless guy is hanging around the training grounds. Errol calmly answers that he came here to practice. The boys burst into laughter. They say someone with no class has no business sparring with real swordsmen. To show off, they start swinging wildly at each other, trying to look cool. Errol isn't impressed. He asks them straight up if they want to spar with him. The two think he's joking, but they're cocky enough to accept. Before they start, one of the boys asks if Errol at least has divine protection. Unlike classes, everyone is born with a divine barrier that protects them from fatal harm, though it can be broken by someone far stronger or worn down over time. Errol nods that he has divine protection, so they assume it's safe to go all out, but Errol coolly adds that he doesn't need divine protection to beat a couple of brats like them. That line hits a nerve. One boy charges at him, sword raised high, planning to end it in one flashy swing. Errol deflects the blow effortlessly. The boy panics and starts slashing wildly, but every single strike is parried or redirected with minimal movement. Desperate, his friend tries to jump in from behind, but Errol simply sidesteps, avoiding the ambush as if it was nothing. Compared to training with his sword saint mother, these kids are painfully slow. Errol decides it'll be more interesting if they come at him together. He steps forward and smacks one boy in the chin with the pommel of his sword, knocking him out instantly. The other trips over his fallen friend and ends up on the ground too, where Errol easily disarms him. Both boys start whining and crying about how unfair it is, acting like sore losers. That's when a sharp voice cuts through the noise. A red-haired boy steps into the ring and tells the two idiots to shut up. If this were a real battlefield, they'd be corpses already. Errol doesn't recognize him, but the redhead clearly knows who Errol is. He walks right up to him and challenges him to a duel. He claims Errol only defeated those two because he inherited some insane talent from his mother, the Sword Saint. But without a proper class, he'll never be able to stand against someone who has both training and a blessing. The red-haired boy proudly introduces himself as the son of Captain Evans, the leader of the village guards. Errol remembers the captain rugged, intimidating, a real veteran. The son, however, doesn't look anything like him. The boy rants that Errol's mother is always praised as the strongest fighter around, while his own father is barely mentioned. To prove whose family is better, he's going to defeat Errol in front of everyone. They take their stances, and the duel begins. The red-haired boy immediately goes on the offensive, aiming to crush Errol with overwhelming pressure before he can react. But Errol has spent years training with a literal sword saint. His defense is solid, his footwork clean, and he calmly blocks and parries each strike. Their speed and intensity shock the two boys watching from the sidelines. This is nothing like their clumsy sparring. Errol quickly realizes that the redhead is leagues above those two, but he's also fighting with too much emotion. His anger makes his movements sloppy and predictable. Errol waits for an opening, planning to counter, but the redhead suddenly jumps back and unleashes a special move, a twin aerial slash. Two blades of energy fly at Errol. He manages to block one, but the second slash smashes into his chest and sends him crashing to the ground. Stunned, Errol gasps and asks what that technique was. The red-haired boy smirks and says it's a skill granted by his class, something a classless nobody like Errol can never obtain. A couple of days pass after that defeat, but instead of breaking him, it lights a fire in Errol's chest. He heads into the forest with his sword and sets up a crude dummy. Over and over, he tries to recreate that twin slash, analyzing every detail he can remember. His stance, his timing, the way the sword moved through the air. After countless attempts and failures, he finally manages to reproduce the move. His blades cut through the dummy in two clean arcs. He barely has time to celebrate when a goblin suddenly jumps out from the bushes, trying to ambush him. Instinctively, Errol turns and unleashes the twin slash. The goblin is cut down instantly. The technique, born from raw practice instead of divine blessing, is real. He's still catching his breath when a deafening roar echoes from deep inside the forest. The sound is so terrifying that it makes Errol's entire body tremble. His first thought is to run back to the village and alert the guards, but then he hears a boy scream. Errol freezes. If he runs to get help, it'll be too late. Whoever screamed will be dead before the adults arrive. He clenches his jaw and decides to go alone. Moving carefully through the trees, he eventually finds the source of the roar. The red-haired boy is there, barely standing, covered in blood, legs shaking. In front of him towers a massive hobgoblin, bigger, stronger, and far more dangerous than any goblin Errol has ever seen. Errol thinks about running to get help again. He's not sure if he can beat a monster like this, but he knows for sure the red-haired boy will die if he leaves, so he makes his choice. He circles around silently, waits for an opening, and when the hobgoblin raises its weapon to finish the redhead off, Errol launches his twin slash. The blades of energy tear through the monster's body, and the hobgoblin collapses with a heavy thud. The red-haired boy stares in disbelief, first at the monster's corpse, then at Errol. That twin slash was a technique he learned after years of training, boosted by his class. Yet Errol, who has no class at all, just copied it. Errol hands him some holy water and tells him to drink. As his wounds start to close, the boy immediately demands to know how Errol pulled off that move. Errol explains that the attack has nothing to do with having a class. Anyone with enough technique, speed, and strength can use it. After losing their duel, he broke down the twin slash step by step, practicing it repeatedly until he understood the fundamentals. Now he can even adjust the move however he wants. The red-haired boy still doesn't want to accept it and challenges Errol to another match on the spot. They stand facing each other, and once again, they both unleash their slashes at the same time. But this time, the result is different. Errol not only blocks the boy's twin slash, he adds a third slash, which cuts past his defense and sends him sprawling to the ground. Shocked and furious, the boy demands to know how that's possible. Errol calmly tells him that he isn't limited by a skill description or system-imposed cap. He's not bound by the twin and twin slash. His only limits are his own body and technique. If he can handle it, he can add as many strikes as he wants. The boy staggers back up, and they clash again. This time, Errol's triple slash hits even harder, dropping him to the ground once more. With the fight decided, Errol simply turns around and walks away, having proven his point with pure skill alone. 5 whole years pass after that moment. 5 years pass, and Errol's training doesn't slow down for even a day. With his basics polished and his copied skills evolving, he finally decides it's time to leave his village and test himself in the wider world. His destination is Brea, the famed kingdom of swords where the strongest swordsmen gather, and where both his mother and Captain Evans once trained. If he wants to stand among the best of the best, that's where he has to go. On the road, Errol rides in a cart with a handful of other travelers. Among them are 2 skilled warriors, a burly man with the barbarian class and a sharp-eyed woman with the dual wielder class. Both of them are heading to Brea to improve their skills, but instead of respecting each other, they're constantly arguing. The barbarian mocks her for being a woman. She claps back every time, and the atmosphere in the cart is tense and noisy. The cart driver, who just wants a peaceful trip, keeps begging them to calm down. He reminds them they're all going to the same place, supposedly for the same goal to get stronger. The barbarian, however, is too full of himself and keeps spouting nonsense about women belonging in the kitchen instead of on the battlefield. Before the argument can escalate any further, the driver suddenly yells at everyone to grab their weapons. They've got trouble. Errol looks ahead and sees it, a horde of orcs standing in the middle of the road, with a massive orc leader towering behind them. The monsters clearly have no intention of letting anyone pass alive. 2 children on the cart immediately start crying and beg the barbarian to protect them. But the barbarian, despite all his big talk, shows his true colors. He declares he's not risking his life for strangers, jumps off the cart, and sprints away without a backward glance. The dual-wielding woman follows soon after, saying coldly that in this world, everyone has to look out for themselves. The driver is left trembling, wondering if he can turn the cart around and outrun the horde. Before he can act, Errol steps down from the cart in complete silence and starts walking toward the monsters. The driver panics and shouts at him to run, saying there's no way he can take on that many orcs alone. Errol doesn't even respond. The moment the first orc steps forward, he disappears from view. In a blur, Errol reappears in front of the closest orc and drives his sword straight into its heart. The driver and passengers stare in shock. Errol continues to move, using his high-speed footwork like a teleportation trick, vanishing and reappearing among the orcs, taking them down one by one with clean, efficient strikes. However, as more orcs pile in, Errol finds himself completely surrounded. His dashing technique becomes harder to use with enemies on all sides. That's when the driver sees something even more unbelievable. Errol plants his feet, tightens his grip, and starts spinning. His blade whirls around him in a controlled spiral, cutting down every orc within reach. It's a famous technique, blade dance, an elegant yet deadly move normally used by swordswomen with the Sword Princess class. As far as the driver knows, only women with that specific blessing should be able to perform it. Yet here is Errol, classless, executing it perfectly. Once the lesser orcs are down, Errol dashes straight toward the massive orc leader. The monster swings a huge weapon at him, but Errol slips past its attack with precise footwork, leaps onto its body, and drives his sword down into its skull. The orc leader collapses with a heavy thud, and the battlefield falls silent. Errol walks back to the cart as if nothing special happened, and tells the stunned driver they can continue toward Brea. One of the children, still shaking, asks what class he has to be able to do all that. Errol simply says, "I don't have a class." Everyone is stunned into silence. As the cart rolls on, Errol remembers a moment from 5 years ago. After he first copied the twin blade technique that defeated him, he showed it to his mother. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but when he told her that his goal was to replicate any skill he sees, regardless of class, she was beyond thrilled. As a sword saint, she decided to teach him every technique she knew, including those normally restricted to the Sword Princess line. Moves that on paper he should never have been able to learn. Back in the present, Errol is shaken awake by the driver. They've arrived. In front of him stretches Bresta, the city of swords. Everywhere he looks, the streets are filled with fighters, each with a blade at their hip. Stalls, practice yards, and guild banners decorate the town. This is clearly a place where swordsmanship rules everything. Errol thanks the driver and steps down. Before the man leaves, Errol turns to him and asks if he is, by any chance, an advanced swordsman. The driver laughs nervously and says he's just a simple cart driver. Errol, however, points out that only a truly skilled swordsman could immediately recognize the techniques he used against the orcs. The man finally admits the truth. He's actually from the Holy Knight class, a strong, respected combat class. But he got tired of constant battles and responsibilities, so sometimes he takes it easy and works as a cart driver instead. The Holy Knight sizes Errol up and realizes this is probably his first time in Bresta. He explains that the first thing Errol needs to do is join a guild. In this city, guilds control access to tournaments, and tournaments are where swordsmen prove their worth, build their reputation, and earn their money. Without a guild, Errol won't be able to enter any official matches. Errol says he isn't interested in money. All he wants is to fight strong opponents and sharpen his skills. The Holy Knight chuckles and warns him to be careful of big toxic guilds that treat their members like disposable tools. Then he waves goodbye and leaves Errol to find his own path. As Errol walks deeper into the city, he sees recruiters standing in the streets, shouting the names of their guilds and trying to lure in talented swordsmen. Long lines form in front of the more famous guilds, while smaller ones desperately try to attract even a single recruit. While weaving through the crowd, Errol bumps into a petite blonde girl. The moment she gets a good look at him, she immediately latches onto his arm and excitedly introduces herself as a member of a well-known guild. She tries to drag him along, insisting that he should join them. Errol is immediately suspicious. Anyone that desperate for members probably isn't from a top guild. He politely refuses. She doesn't give up. She keeps begging him to come just for a little meeting, promising benefits and opportunities. Errol, staying firm, asks her a simple question. What's the strongest guild in this city? Reluctantly, she answers that right now. The Shadowblade Guild is considered one of the strongest. They have multiple high-ranking swordsmen and a serious reputation. As soon as he hears that, Errol asks for directions and walks off in that direction, leaving her pouting behind him. At Shadowblade's headquarters, a guard tells him to go through reception if he wants to apply. Inside, Errol finds a huge line of hopeful swordsmen, all waiting for a chance to take the entrance test. The atmosphere excites him. These are the kind of places where strong people gather. When his turn finally comes, he steps up to the counter and gives his name. The receptionist asks for his class. When he says he doesn't have one, she immediately bursts out laughing. She tells him that only people with advanced swordsman classes are allowed to take the guild's trial. A classless guy applying to Shadowblade is, in her eyes, a joke. Errol insists that he's confident he can pass any test they put in front of him, but she flat out refuses to register him. While he's still standing there, 3 of the guild's A-rank swordsmen walk in. Everyone around them goes wild, cheering and admiring them like celebrities. Errol glances at them, then quietly turns away and leaves. He spends the rest of the day going from guild to guild, but the result is the same everywhere. The moment they hear that he has no class, they reject him without even bothering to test his skills. Tired and frustrated, Errol steps away from the main streets and pulls out a letter his mother gave him before he left home. She told him that if he ever ran into trouble, he should look for her old guild because they would definitely help him out. He wonders if she predicted he'd have this much difficulty joining a normal guild. Either way, he's grateful for the backup plan. Before he can finish reading the letter, a familiar voice calls out to him. The blonde girl from earlier appears once more and grabs onto him, saying their offer still stands. They're willing to accept him. Errol reflexively refuses again. She practically begs this time. She admits that their guild is in a rough spot and asks him to join as a kind of charity. She points toward a large, impressive-looking guild building nearby and proudly declares that it's her guild's base. That catches Errol off guard. The place looks like it belongs to a top-tier group, not a struggling one. The girl explains that their guild, Dragon Fang, used to be one of the strongest guilds in the country. For a long time, they were at the very top, but over the years, things went downhill, and now they're considered the weakest. The name Dragon Fang rings a bell in Errol's mind. He remembers his mother telling him stories about her old guild leader, a dual-wielding swordsman who named his guild Dragon Fang after his signature move. Errol quickly checks the letter and confirms it. This is the guild his mother mentioned. That decides it. He agrees to at least go inside with the blonde girl. She lights up with joy and leads him into the building. But instead of a bustling, powerful guild hall, Errol finds a quiet, almost empty space. On a couch lies an older man with only one arm, drinking heavily. The moment he sees Errol, he waves him away and tells him to go somewhere else. The guild is finished, and there's no future here. The blonde girl frowns and quietly explains that the one-armed drunk is her father. He used to be the second strongest swordsman in the city, a legend in his own right. But after losing his arm, he fell into despair and never fully recovered mentally. Despite all that, Errol calmly says that he still wants to join Dragon Fang. The girl's mood shifts instantly. Overjoyed, she scrambles to prepare a membership form. Errol fills it out and hands it back. She scans it, then frowns and points out that he left the class section empty. That's when Errol tells her plainly that he doesn't have a class. She snaps. Thinking he had been playing hard to get because he was some advanced class swordsman, she grabs her sword, furious that she was tricked into getting excited. Before she can blow up further, the guild hall's door opens. A red-haired beauty steps in. Her name is Rai, and the blonde girl runs to her in tears, complaining that a classless guy tricked her into putting him on the roster. Rai's eyes immediately lock onto Errol. She says she never thought she'd see him here, of all places. Errol blinks confused and asks how she knows him. Rai looks almost offended and reminds him that they're from the same village, that they used to train in the same place. He still can't place her until it finally hits him. The red-haired boy he fought over and over in the past, the one who mastered twin slashes, was never a boy. It was her. The blonde girl who knows the story asks Rai if Errol is really the classless guy who beat her years ago. She always thought that story was exaggerated or fake. Rai, still holding on to that loss, doesn't deny it. Instead, she challenges Errol to a rematch on the spot. They head outside, take their stances, and the duel begins. Rai opens with the same twin slash technique Errol once copied. Confident, he moves to counter it, but this time, her attack tears straight through his and slams into his chest, sending him skidding back. He quickly realizes something is different. Rai explains why she now has the Power Swordsman class. Thanks to that, she can wield a sword that's 5 times heavier than a normal blade and still swing it with speed. That means her strikes carry 5 times the force of a standard swordsman's attacks. Errol is impressed. Not only did she keep her speed, she massively increased her raw power. Still, speed is his specialty. The next time she charges in, he leaves behind an afterimage, making it look like he's still in front of her while he actually moves behind. She slashes through the illusion, and he taps her from behind. Rai is stunned. Only top-tier swordsmen can use afterimage techniques reliably, and Errol has no class, no system-backed skills, just pure technique. They clash again and again. Errol soon realizes that her durability is off the charts. If he just trades blows, he can't bring her down easily. Rai knows it too, and tries to finish things with her overwhelming power. But Errol has one more card to play, his mother's signature counter technique. He baits her into a heavy strike, reads her timing, and redirects her full power back at her. Rai is brought to her knees. The duel is over. The blonde girl's attitude flips completely. She goes from angry and suspicious to thrilled and respectful in an instant. She officially welcomes Errol to Dragon Fang, though she admits they're in massive debt. To climb out of their financial hole, they have to enter tournaments and win prize money and rewards. The problem? Other guilds can field a full team of 5 fighters. Dragon Fang currently only has 3. Rai, the blonde girl, and now Errol. Errol doesn't see it as a problem. To him, it just means stronger opponents and harder fights, which is exactly what he wants. He's genuinely excited at the chance to stand against powerful guilds and keep pushing his limits. The next morning, he wakes up in his own room at the guild base, lying in a bed that now officially belongs to him. A new home, a new team, and the first step toward becoming the strongest classless swordsman in the world. Errol slowly wakes up in his new room, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling for a few seconds before everything clicks into place. He's not in his village anymore, he's in Bresta, the city of swords. And more importantly, he now belongs to Dragon Fang, the same legendary guild his mother once fought for. Just remembering that makes his chest tighten with resolve. This is the guild his mom helped make famous, the guild that fell from glory. Now it's his turn. He quietly decides that no matter what, he's going to help restore Dragon Fang's name and make his mother proud. After washing up, he heads to the common room. By the fireplace, the blonde girl Loli and Rai are already awake, drinking tea and talking nervously about the upcoming tournament. The moment Loli sees him, she waves him over and drags him into the conversation. She explains that the tournament starts next week, and now that Dragon Fang has 3 official members instead of just 2, they're finally eligible to participate. The format will be brutal, elimination style, one-on-one duels, and most guilds will be fielding 5 fighters. Dragon Fang, on the other hand, only has 3. That means each of them will likely have to defeat more than one opponent just to get through the first round. Even so, Loli is surprisingly optimistic. She reminds them that both she and Rai are B-rank swordsmen, and since Errol managed to defeat Rai in a straight duel, that puts him at least at B-rank level as well. Errol, still new to the ranking system, asks what the ranks actually mean. Loli happily explains, swordsmen in Bresta are ranked from D to A, with A rank being the absolute top. Out of all the swordsmen in the city, only 20 have ever reached A rank. D rank is basically someone who just learned how to hold a sword. B rank, where she claims the 3 of them stand, is already considered quite strong. So if we don't run straight into any A rank monsters, she says, puffing out her chest, we've got a real chance in the early rounds. With that, she heads into the kitchen, leaving Errol and Rai alone. As Rai turns to leave as well, Errol stops her and asks about her power swordsman abilities. Still salty about losing their duel yesterday, she crosses her arms but answers anyway. One of her main skills, she explains, is the ability to harden her mana barrier, boosting her physical defense and letting her shrug off most weak or medium strength blows. Errol immediately starts thinking about how useful that would be in chaotic fights against multiple opponents. If he could reinforce his body the same way, he wouldn't have to worry as much about stray hits. An idea hits him. He asks Rai to hit him hard with her sword while it's still in the sheath. Rai goes bright red and gives him a suspicious look, completely misreading his request. She mumbles something about how if he's into weird things, maybe they should start with something more normal first. Errol, realizing they are absolutely not thinking the same thing, quickly clarified. He explains that he wants to feel how her mana barrier works when it clashes with an attack, so he can try to recreate it himself. She stares at him like he's lost his mind. Skills, she insists, are blessings from the goddess, not techniques you can just copy. They're not meant to be learned like sword swings. But Errol calmly reminds her that he already copied techniques like twin slashes and high-speed footwork just by watching and practicing. He doesn't believe in the idea that only people with blessings can grow strong. That shuts Rai up. After a moment, she sighs and agrees to help, just this once. They head to the training yard. Before they begin, Rai hands him her sword and warns him it's 5 times heavier than a normal blade. Without her class's brute strength boosts, most people wouldn't even be able to lift it properly, let alone swing it. Errol wraps his fingers around the hilt, draws the blade, and casually swings it through the air like it's completely normal. His form is smooth, his control perfect. Rai is stunned, speechless. Again, how are you doing this without a class or strength skills? She demands. Errol answers simply, hard work. Every technique, every move he's mastered came from endless practice and training, not from a divine label floating above his head. He swears he'll catch up to everyone's natural talent with sheer effort alone. Something softens in Rai's eyes. She apologizes for mocking him before and takes her sword back. Then she warns him that if they're doing this, she won't be pulling her strikes. Perfect, Errol said. A second later, she smacks him square in the chest with her sheathed sword and sends him flying. Time passes as they repeat this again and again. Errol focuses on feeling the flow of mana, the impact, the timing. Little by little, he starts to sense how her defense works and how his body should react. In the middle of their training, Loli comes running down the stairs, out of breath and panicking. She yells for them to stop and announces that she has just found out which guild Dragonfang will be facing in the first round, and the news is terrible. Their opponent is none other than Black Blade, the top guild in the city, known for having 8 A-rank swordsmen. Their leader, Gio, is especially infamous, vicious, cunning, and ruthless in battle. Loli refuses to back down though. With fiery determination, she insists they'll just have to do their best and somehow defeat their opponents, no matter how strong they are. She then glances over and sees Errol lying on the ground, bruised and barely moving after Rai's no-holding-back training. Loli asks if he's dead. Rai sighs and says they're doing special training, but Loli mutters that it just looks like Rai is using the newbie as a stress relief dummy. Errol groans, gets back up, and declares that he's starving after getting beaten all morning. They call it a break. A week flies by in intense training. Finally, the day of the tournament arrives. The arena is a massive coliseum packed with spectators from all over the country. The stands rumble with excited chatter, some people hyped to see legendary A-rank fighters, others gossiping about which guilds will rise or fall today. Errol steps into the stadium and is awed by the size of the venue. This is a different world compared to the training grounds back home. Nearby, Loli overhears people snickering about Dragonfang, calling them a washed-up guild that burned out years ago. Her temper flares, but Rai grabs her shoulder and calms her down before she can start a fight in the stands. Errol notices something else. There's heavy gambling on the matches. People are placing bets on which guild will win. Loli tells him that in their matchup, the odds are 20-1 against Dragonfang. Errol honestly thinks that sounds pretty impressive. Loli yells at him. Those odds mean almost nobody in the city believes they have even a tiny chance at victory. But at the same time, if they do manage to win, they'll make a fortune. She reveals that, in typical desperate fashion, she has taken a loan using the guild house as collateral and bet heavily on their own victory. If they win, their debt will be wiped out. They'll be rich, and Dragonfang's reputation will skyrocket again. If they lose, everything is gone. Guild, home, future. Rai stares at her in disbelief, asking what they're supposed to do if they lose. Loli just shrugs darkly. If they lose, they're ruined anyway, so they might as well go all in. Their conversation is interrupted when a man calls out to Loli by name. The three turn to see Gio, the handsome yet sneering leader of Black Blade, striding over with a smug grin. He mocks Dragonfang for still clinging to life and admits that he personally pulled strings to arrange their guilds to face each other in the very first round. For him, it's the perfect chance, an easy win for his guild, and a final blow to the remnants of a once great rival. He even says he'll admit Dragonfang is the best if they somehow beat his A-rank swordsman, but then points at Errol and snickers about them bringing a classless nobody into such a high-level tournament. Chuckling at his own cleverness, Gio wishes them good luck and walks away. Soon after, both guilds are called into the arena. Errol notices that Gio isn't among the fighters on the stage and wonders if that improves their odds. Rai shakes her head. All of Black Blade's fighters today are A rank, so it doesn't really matter who shows up. On top of that, she says, their lineup looks more aggressive than usual, as if they're planning to crush Dragonfang as violently and quickly as possible. The announcer introduces the first fighter from Black Blade, a green-haired boy with the Fencer class. The boy arrogantly declares that he'll defeat the entire opposing team by himself. Then, from Dragonfang's side, the announcer introduces something the crowd wasn't expecting. Errol, the classless swordsman. The audience erupts, some in laughter, some in curiosity, some in disbelief. The fencer seems bored. To him, it doesn't matter how fast he wins. A classless opponent won't even be a warm-up. The match begins. In an instant, the fencer lunges forward with blinding speed and drives his sword through Errol's chest. The crowd gasps. It looks like a one-hit knockout. Loli screams in panic, but Rai urges her to look closer. Errol's body flickers and dissolves into shadow. It was just an afterimage. The fencer, annoyed but still confident, spins and thrusts again, only to pierce another illusion. More afterimages appear, moving around him in every direction. Frowning, he decides to just cut them all down. He slashes through 1, 2, 3 figures, only to feel a sharp pain as the real Errol appears at his blind spot and stabs him cleanly. The fencer drops to the ground, defeated.
The crowd loses it. Producing even one after image is difficult. Errol managed to create 3 and use them strategically in his attack pattern. He casually remarks that his mother used to spar with him while using 5 after images at once, and that was her taking it easy. The commentator is stunned. The stands roar with cheers for the classless fighter who just ruined an A-rank's confidence. Errol, meanwhile, analyzes the fencer's technique. He realizes they used very similar high-speed movement, but the fencer's version was a bit rough compared to his mother's form. There's still room to refine that style further. His next opponent steps in, a dual wielder, who launches a storm of attacks with both blades. Errol calmly blocks and parries the relentless barrage, waiting for an opening. When he sees his chance, he counters with a perfectly timed twin slash, cutting through the man's guard and dropping him. 2 A ranks down. The third opponent is a reverse grip dagger user, mixing martial arts and close range blade work. He moves carefully, watching Errol's steps, relying on footwork and deception, but Errol's speed and after images thoroughly overwhelm him. The dagger user is soon slashed from behind and collapses. Rai and Loli watch from the waiting area, stunned that Errol has just defeated 3 A-rank swordsmen in a row without any divine class backing him up. For the first time, real hope sparks in Loli's chest. The 4th fighter is a shield swordsman. This one is tougher. His defense is so solid that Errol struggles to land any meaningful hits. The match slows down as Errol is forced to constantly move, dodge, and chip away at the man's guard. The shield user shouts in frustration, accusing Errol of lying about being classless. Someone like this must have some broken blessing or cheat skill. Errol replies that everything he's done so far is just the result of training. The shield bearer laughs and says hard work alone will never beat real talent. He charges forward with a powerful shield bash technique meant to crush his opponents outright. Errol narrows his eyes and uses one of his mother's trademark skills, foresight. Reading the man's body movements, he anticipates the timing and angle perfectly, steps aside, and kicks the shield out of position. Drawing on what he observed from the martial artist earlier, he uses a clean close-range kick to the stomach, staggering the man. Then in a twist, Errol picks up the shield himself, advances, and uses the same shield bash technique against its original owner, smashing him off his feet and finishing the match. The arena erupts again, but this time, it's not just cheers. Some people start shouting that this has to be fake, that someone like this can't be classless. The organizers quickly bring Errol's identification to a magical crystal and project the result for everyone to see. The crystal confirms it. Class, none. Class, none. No hidden blessing. No secret hero class. Just a classless swordsman. With the controversy settled, the final Black Blade fighter steps into the ring. His name is Masamune. He's of Eastern samurai lineage, carrying a single curved sword, a katana. The atmosphere shifts. This man is different from the others. Even before Masamune draws his blade, Errol feels the danger. He can tell the samurai is preparing to use a single decisive finishing technique, and is just waiting for the perfect moment to strike, like a coiled snake. Errol is tempted to stay out of range, but his curiosity wins. He steps forward, deliberately walking into Masamune's zone. The instant he does, Masamune moves. His katana flashes out in a lightning-fast cut, meant to end the fight in a single blow. But Errol is faster. He vanishes from the front and appears behind the single blow. But Errol is faster. He vanishes from the front and appears behind Masamune in the same breath. The samurai is shocked. No one has ever outrun that strike before. Errol tells him honestly that he's the fastest swordsman. Errol is not only that he's the fastest swordsman, Errol is Steps' fastest swordsman. Errol is still swordsman. Errol is the net in the city so far, but he's still slower than Errol's matters cities, and Errol has trained his whole life to keep up with her. Drawing on everything he's learned, Errol Usu's son. Errol unleashes the Sword Princess's ultimate seven, a technique, a flurry of precise ultimate technique, a flurry of precise multi-point flesh season cuts that hit Masamune in rapid succession. The samurai collapses, sick, defeated. The stadium falls silent, hurried through
The so-called weakest member of the weakest guild has just clean swept the main members of the strongest guild, 5 A-rank swordsmen in a row. Errol calmly walks back to Rai and Loli, his expression relaxed, but his heart pounding with satisfaction. At the very least, he thinks, they've now earned enough money and respect to keep Dragonfang alive, and this is only the beginning. Back at the guild house, the atmosphere is completely different from before. The halls that once felt heavy and gloomy are now filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Loli orders drinks for everyone, and they throw an impromptu celebration. Errol sits there, still a little dazed. He knew he fought hard, but even he can't quite believe that he single-handedly defeated 5 A-rank swordsmen from the strongest guild in the country. Loli, cheeks flushed from alcohol, leans over the table and points at him dramatically, insisting she still can't believe it either. Errol is even more shocked by the fact that she's drinking in the first place. She puffs out her cheeks and snaps that she's a full-grown woman, even if she looks small. Then as the reality of their situation sinks in, that this classless swordsman just revived their dying guild, Loli's gaze turns laser-focused. She decides right then and there that she needs to secure this golden ticket out of debt and obscurity. She slides closer to Errol, eyes sparkling with fake innocence, and suddenly asks him to marry her. She claims she'll take care of him, support him, and fulfill all his desires if he just agrees. Errol doesn't even hesitate. He rejects her on the spot and calmly says that if he had to choose, he'd prefer someone like Rai instead. Rai, who was quietly sipping her drink, chokes and jumps to her feet, blushing furiously. She yells at him to stop saying embarrassing things just to turn Loli down, but Errol looks serious. He asks why she thinks he's joking. Rai mutters that when they were kids, he literally mistook her for a boy during their sparring, and ever since then, people have told her she has no feminine charm. Errol, however, very clearly notices that she definitely does have feminine charm, and he's looking right at it. He doesn't say it out loud in detail, but it's obvious enough what he means. Loli, watching from the side, realizes that Rai has no idea how powerful her natural appeal actually is, and decides she doesn't need to worry too much about that competition for now. Switching tactics, Loli starts rubbing Errol's leg under the table, claiming he must be exhausted after all the fighting. She suggests that he come to her room later so she can take care of him properly. Rai immediately flushes red again and tells Loli to stop saying weird things, but Loli smiles and insists she's only offering a well-deserved massage after a hard day. To her surprise, Errol just shakes his head and says if it's massage we're talking about, he'd rather have one from Rai, but his idea of a massage is different. Soon after, he's back out in the training yard, completely covered in bruises, while Rai relentlessly smacks him around with her sheathed sword. He's using this massage session as a chance to master the reinforcement technique that Rai uses so naturally thanks to her class, toughening his body with mana to withstand powerful blows. Loli watches from the balcony, sipping her drink and wondering if Errol even knows what a real massage is supposed to be. All the noise eventually wakes Rod, Loli's father, from his drunken sleep. He staggers out into the training yard, hungover and irritated, demanding to know why they're making such a racket in the middle of the night. He assumes they're blowing off steam because they lost their tournament match. Loli quickly tells him that they didn't lose. They actually won. Not just any match, either. They beat Black Blade, the top guild in the country. That gets Rod's attention. At first, he assumes Black Blade must have sent some weak B or C rank rookies. Loli corrects him, saying every single one of their opponents was A rank, and Errol defeated them all by himself. Rod stares at Errol, still lying on the ground, bruised but alive, and wonders if this kid could really be that strong. Loli goes on to explain that she had placed a ton of bets on their match. Thanks to Errol's clean sweep, she hit the jackpot. Not only are they out of debt, they now have enough money to keep the guild running comfortably for a while. But Rod doesn't look thrilled. He says that if Errol is truly that powerful, it's only a matter of time before a larger, richer guild tries to poach him away. Loli shouldn't get too hopeful. Loli refuses to accept that. She confidently announces that she's going to marry Errol, and once that happens, he'll be tied to Dragonfang for life. Errol immediately objects, saying there's no way that's happening. Then he turns his attention toward Rod. Calmly but firmly, Errol says that Loli may be stubborn and reckless, but at least she's not someone who's given up on life. His words clearly refer to Rod's current state, drunk, bitter, and retired. Rod narrows his eyes dangerously, but Errol continues, saying that Rod should stop sulking and acting like everything is over when he still has one perfectly usable arm. He argues that a swordsman with one hand is still a swordsman, and someone like Rod, who was once incredibly strong, still has value. That hits a nerve. Rod grabs Errol by the collar and tells him to shut up about things he doesn't understand. He says a dual-wielding swordsman who can no longer dual-wield is nothing but a broken leftover. Errol calmly disagrees and says he's a classless swordsman competing in a world built for people with blessings and special talents. He refuses to let that stop him, so why should Rod? Rod shoves him away and storms back upstairs without another word. Loli and Rai rush over to check if Errol is okay. Loli apologizes for her father's behavior while also thanking Errol for speaking up. Errol brushes the dust off and says that even now, after losing his arm and wasting years, Rod is still incredibly strong. Letting that strength and experience rot away is a massive waste. He also thinks of something else, the amount of techniques he could learn from a former top-tier dual-wielding swordsman like Rod. Quietly, he makes a promise to himself. He'll motivate Rod to pick up the sword again, no matter what it takes. Loli, overhearing his interest in learning new skills, suggests they start exploring dungeons near the city. Errol blinks, clearly unfamiliar with the concept. So Rai explains, dungeons are multi-layered underground caverns filled with traps and packed with monsters. They're dangerous, but they're the best place to gain real combat experience, earn money, and test techniques under pressure. For swordsmen aiming for the top, dungeon runs are invaluable, especially if they're planning to enter the Sword God Cup. Errol asks what that is, and Rai explains that the Sword God Cup is a grand annual tournament where the strongest swordsmen in the country gather to prove who deserves to be called the #1 swordsman. Loli immediately pulls out a form and excitedly tells Errol to sign it so he can participate, but when he glances at it, he notices something off. Without a word, he rips the paper in half. Rai shouts in shock, asking if he doesn't want to enter the Sword God Cup. Errol calmly replies that the paper wasn't a tournament application. It was a marriage certificate. Loli tried to sneak past him. Loli laughs nervously and says she was just testing the waters. Errol has had enough of her tricks and grabs her from behind in a playful chokehold to teach her a lesson while she flails and protests. The next morning, Errol wakes up to find Loli trying to climb into his bed and pull something sneaky again. He dodges her attempt, ties her to the bedpost with the sheets for safety, and leaves her there as he heads out. A little later, Rai frees her with a sigh. That day, the three of them, Errol, Rai, and Loli, head to the city's main dungeon. In the entrance chamber, Loli explains how the teleportation circles work. Each circle can send a party directly to a dungeon floor they've already been to before. You can't teleport to a floor you haven't physically reached at least once. Loli proudly says she's made it as far as floor 12, while Rai has reached floor 14. Errol immediately says he wants to go with Rai straight to the 14th floor so he can fight strong enemies right away. Loli tells him it doesn't work like that. He has to climb down there at least once before he unlocks it as a teleport destination. That's a disappointment for Errol, but Loli tells him not to worry. She claims she knows a shortcut route that will let them dive deeper quickly. As they prepare to go, Loli tries one more time to separate him from Rai, suggesting that Rai continue her own floor 14 run alone, while she guides Errol personally. Errol isn't fooled and insists Rai comes with them. They teleport to the first floor and are immediately attacked by two heavily armored knights. Errol draws his sword and engages one, while Rai moves smoothly to intercept the other. The knight's armor is thick, but what really surprises Errol is how quickly they move despite the weight. He uses his high-speed step technique, closes in, and decapitates the knight in a clean swing. But instead of a corpse, he finds an empty suit of armor. There's nothing inside, no body, no blood. The armor stands up again, animated by dungeon mana. Rai explains that these enchanted knight armors don't feel pain and have no real weak points. So Errol changes tactics. Instead of going for the body, he targets the joints and legs, chopping them out from under the armor. Without its legs, the knight collapses and can't move properly. Rai finishes off her opponent as well and says they should keep moving. These things will eventually regenerate. Before they head to the next floor, Errol asks Loli what her class actually is. She proudly declares that she's a fencer and offers to teach him anything he wants, whether in the training ground or somewhere more private. Errol ignores the implication and just keeps walking. As they approach the door to the second floor, they hear a faint voice crying for help. Inside, they find a man kneeling on the ground, covered in blood and seemingly injured badly. Rai suggests taking him back to the surface, but the man refuses, saying his party members are still inside. They were caught in a trap, and he barely escaped. He begs them to help rescue his friends. Loli, being who she is, immediately asks how much he's willing to pay. To her surprise, he pulls out a decent sum from gambling winnings and pays her on the spot. She agrees to guide them deeper. Errol, however, feels something is off. He quietly notes that someone who lost that much blood shouldn't be able to move so easily, walk steadily, or talk this clearly without immediate treatment. The injuries look staged. Still, instead of exposing him, Errol decides to go along and see where this leads. He suspects something interesting might come out of it. The injured man leads them through a hidden passage to a secret room. Inside, there's a trail of blood and a small puddle at the center with a single gold coin gleaming in it. Loli's eyes instantly lock onto the coin. She rushes forward to pick it up. The moment she touches it, a magic circle lights up beneath all of them. Rai realizes it's a trap, but before she can react, the teleport activates. Even the fake victim is dragged along. Apparently, he didn't know he'd be included. All of them are transported to a floor that even Rai has never seen. That means they've been thrown somewhere deeper than the 14th floor. The man starts trembling as he recognizes where they are. He stammers that this is supposed to be the dungeon's lowest level, the rumored home of the sword god. Almost on cue, a knight in shimmering rainbow armor appears before them. Loli scoffs, saying the sword god class is just a legend. Errol, however, can immediately feel the overwhelming danger and knows this is no ordinary foe. He pushes Loli out of the way just as the knight unleashes a massive aerial slash that tears through the dungeon wall like paper. Without pause, the sword god charges at Errol. He barely manages to raise his sword in time and block the blow, but the impact sends him crashing into the stone wall. Thanks to the reinforcement training he did with Rai, his body holds together instead of breaking. Errol recovers and swings back, but the knight's movements are incredibly sharp and refined. He dodges out of range instantly, using advanced footwork that reminds Errol of the strongest swordsman he has ever seen. Instead of panicking, Errol grins. This is exactly the kind of opponent he's been longing to test himself against. He uses his own high-speed technique to close the distance, launching a barrage of strikes. The sword god blocks them one after another but is forced to step back. Then the knight changes tactics. He activates a skill that suddenly increases the gravity in the room. Loli, Rai, and even the fake victim are slammed to the floor, unable to move. Only Errol remains standing. For a moment, the others think it's impossible, but Errol has been through this kind of training before. He remembers being a kid, standing under crushing pressure while his mother pushed him to keep his stance. Back then, he could barely move. Now he digs in his heels and withstands it. Still, he knows he needs a way to break through this disadvantage. He pulls out the gold coin from earlier, the same suspicious coin that triggered the teleport trap. When he activates it, it reacts with the gravity spell, creating a brief opening as the field destabilizes. That tiny gap is all Errol needs. He launches forward with one of his strongest techniques, Infinite Break, a relentless series of strikes that rain down on the sword god knight. The enchanted armor shudders, cracks, and finally shatters into pieces. The knight collapses, defeated. Everyone in the room is stunned into silence. After catching his breath and drinking some holy water to recover, Errol helps the others stand. They use the emergency teleportation system to return to the surface. Meanwhile, back in town, Rod is drinking at a bar. Again, he overhears a group of young idiots bragging about how they tricked the new members of Dragonfang into a trap inside the dungeon. According to them, those newbies are probably dead by now.
Rod smashes their table with a single punch and demands they explain exactly what they did. Before they can spill everything, a familiar voice calls him a washed-up drunk. It's Jorg, a shady man Rod clearly recognizes. Rod instantly realizes Jorg must have been behind the trap. If that's true, the chances of his daughter surviving are slim. Rage and despair well up inside him. He lunges at Jorg but is easily shoved aside. Kneeling on the floor, he curses his own weakness and wishes he could have protected Loli. Then a familiar voice cuts through the tension. Rod looks toward the entrance and sees Loli, Rai, and Errol casually walking into the tavern, talking about how hungry they are, as if they just came back from a simple errand. Loli spots her father and Jorgen stops. Rod nearly collapses in relief as he rushes over and grips her in a tight hug, thanking the gods that his daughter is alive. Rai steps forward and coldly tells Jorg that they already got the truth from his hired decoy inside the dungeon. They know the trap was his doing. Jorg, like a slippery politician, denies everything. He says people who enter dungeons are responsible for their own lives and safety. Errol, hearing that, thinks the logic is harsh, but not entirely wrong. In the dungeon, even one careless step can kill you. Rod warns Jorg that he won't get away with this, but Jorg just sneers, calls Rod a good-for-nothing drunk, and walks out. Errol watches him leave, wondering what tricks and schemes they'll have to deal with next. A few days pass. Then, one morning, Loli receives a sealed scroll. Inside are the preliminary brackets for the next big tournament, the battles that will decide the future of Dragonfang, and Errol's path as a swordsman are about to begin.
When the preliminary brackets are finally posted, Loli rushes to read them, and her face falls instantly. To her horror, she finds her own name in the same bracket as Errol. That means if they both keep winning, they'll be forced to fight each other, and she already knows how that would end. In her head, her chances of reaching the main tournament instantly drop to 0. Errol, meanwhile, is still trying to fully understand how this whole prelim system works. Rai patiently explains that because the Sword God tournament attracts a ridiculous number of swordsmen, it's impossible to let everyone into the main stage. So the city holds preliminary blocks. Several groups are formed randomly by dice roll, and only the winner of each block earns a ticket to the real tournament. Errol leans over Loli's shoulder and checks the scroll for himself. He realizes that Rai is in a different group from him entirely. Rai lets out a quiet sigh of relief and thanks the gods under her breath, because if she ran into Errol in prelims, she knows she wouldn't stand a chance. She clasps her hands and starts praying for an easy road through her own block, while Errol casually teases her about being overly dramatic and probably having dad issues on top of everything else. Rai rolls her eyes, but before the bickering can escalate, Loli cuts in and says they should head back to the dungeon for more training. Errol groans. He's already bored of dungeon grinding at this point and says he'd rather skip it. Loli tries to act all cute and helpless, insisting she needs a strong man to protect her if something goes wrong in the deeper floors. Rai, watching this, can't help thinking that Loli is way too dependent on others and silently resolves to knock some independence into her someday. Before they can leave, Rod appears at the doorway. He walks in with more intensity than usual, grabs Loli by the shoulders, and tells her to be extremely careful. With Jorg still lurking around and pulling strings from the shadows, Rod is terrified something might happen to his daughter again. Loli can see the fear in his eyes, so for once she doesn't tease him. She quietly promises to be careful and heads out. Rod turns around and sees Errol watching him with a calm, unreadable expression. Rod grumbles that he still has time to pull himself together and be the protective father he should have been from the start. Errol just gives him a small smile and says it's never too late to start being a decent person. Then he heads out too. A couple of weeks pass in a blur of training, dungeon fights, and preparation. Finally, the day of the preliminaries arrives. The Colosseum is packed. Spectators fill the seats, shouting and cheering as countless swordsmen clash on the sand below. Sparks fly with every strike, and one by one, the weaker fighters are eliminated. Loli fights her own matches, but things don't go as she'd hoped. She's knocked out of the prelims before she even gets the chance to face Errol. She sits in a corner of the waiting area afterward, sulking. She had dreamed of at least reaching the finals of her block this year, but reality slapped her again. Errol, instead of comforting her, points out, completely deadpan, that she was stressing for no reason about possibly meeting him in the same bracket. Even if they had met, she would have lost anyway. That doesn't help. Loli looks like she's about to cry again, but she forces herself to stand up straight. She tells him to stop underestimating everyone else just because he's strong. She warns him that the other finalist in his block has some unique tricks and won't be easy to handle. Errol shrugs, saying that after everything he's seen in the dungeon, skill users, weird monsters, crazy traps, it's hard to imagine some ordinary tournament opponent surprising him now. Loli shakes her head. She explains that this opponent isn't just any swordsman. She's a red-haired magic swordsman. Her class allows her to cast magic and channel it directly into her weapon, reinforcing her blade with mana and elemental power. That finally catches Errol's interest. He hadn't expected magic to be allowed in a competition focused on swordsmanship. Loli explains that in this city, it doesn't matter what your class is. As long as you fight using a sword and belong to a guild, you're eligible to compete. Magic swordsmen, holy knights, fencers, power swordsmen, they all qualify, as long as they fight with blades. Soon, the announcer calls for the final match of Errol's block. Errol walks into the arena under the roar of the crowd. On the opposite side stands his opponent, a red-haired girl wielding a sword with an elegant stance. Before the match even begins, she declares that she is a magic swordsman, and her class is officially recognized in the tournament. She tells Errol not to complain later that the fight was unfair because she used magic. Errol calmly replies that he doesn't care what class she uses. They're here to fight, and the stronger one will win. Simple as that. The match starts. Immediately, she raises her hand and hurls a barrage of fireballs toward him. Errol bends, twists, and slides through the blazing projectiles, slashing some apart and letting others whiz past his shoulder. The crowd gasps as he moves like a shadow weaving through fire, but his opponent has a huge mana pool and doesn't slow down. She keeps casting, forcing him to stay constantly on the move. Eventually, he closes the distance, darting in to strike, but she blocks the blow and uses another fireball at close range to drive him back. Errol starts to get a feel for her style. He comments that being able to freely switch between long-range magic and close-range sword combat must be pretty convenient. She smirks and calls herself gifted, boasting that a classless nobody like him has no chance of beating her. Errol calmly points out that while she's good at both magic and swordplay, she doesn't truly master either. She's spread herself too thin. That hits a nerve. Angered, she screams that she'll make him eat those words. She channels magic into her sword, and flames engulf the blade, turning it into a burning sword. She claims that only a true magic swordsman can wield a weapon like this. With a sweeping motion, she sends a flaming arc chasing after him. Errol dodges, raises his blade, and slashes through the fire, but her movements become more unpredictable, and for a moment even he struggles to read the trajectory of her next strike. He acknowledges, in his own mind, that she does have talent and has clearly trained hard, but then he stops running around and plants his feet firmly on the ground. The next series of flame-coated strikes comes flying at him, and Errol deflects them all without moving from his spot. Each attack is turned aside with precise, minimal movements. No wasted motion, no panic, just pure discipline and control. He tells her that with her talent, she could have been terrifying if she'd refined her basics more, instead of trying to juggle everything at once. At her current level, he says, she's just a bit better than the random opponents he sees as background characters. The insult utterly humiliates her. In that moment of emotional tilt, she overextends herself. Errol seizes the opening, unleashes a twin slash that tears straight through her flaming strike, snuffing it out in midair. Before she can even understand what just happened, he uses Blink Step to appear behind her and cracks her on the back of the head with the pommel of his sword. She hits the ground, unconscious. The crowd explodes into cheers as the announcer declares Errol the winner of Block 4. Loli and Rai are stunned by how effortlessly he handled a magic swordsman. Errol, however, is already thinking about something else, how he can adapt and master the magic-imbued sword techniques he just witnessed. A few days pass. The prelims are over. Now the main Sword God tournament is about to begin. Early in the morning, Loli returns to the guild house to wake her father. She insists he has to come watch the finals with her so they can cheer on both Errol and Rai, who each won their blocks and made it into the main tournament. Rod lies in bed, eyes closed, and tells her to go alone. He claims he doesn't care about some flashy event. Loli tries to provoke him, asking if he's just scared of running into Jorg there. That hits home. Rod bristles and snaps that he's not afraid of that snake, but then his anger fades, and for a moment he speaks honestly. He admits that he tried picking up his sword again the previous day. When he swung it, he realized just how rusty he's become. He's no longer sure he could win, even if he tried entering the Sword God tournament himself. That sets Loli off. She reminds him that someone like her couldn't even pass the prelims, yet he, in his worst condition, still considers himself too rusty to win the entire thing. She tells him to think about what that means. Even now, he's still far above the average swordsman who trains non-stop, yet can't clear the first round. Her words slowly get through to him. Rod finally agrees to go. As they walk toward the stadium together, he remembers his days as a dual-wielding swordsman, the time he spent training Rai, and how proud he was of her progress. Even with only one arm now, he's still deeply connected to her as his oldest student. Inside the tournament waiting area, Rai is sitting quietly, shaking her leg and staring at the ground, nerves getting the better of her. Errol appears beside her out of nowhere and asks if she's nervous. They might end up facing each other in the very first round. Rai jumps, startled, and immediately swings at him in embarrassment. Errol casually catches her fist. Then the announcer's amplified voice echoes through the arena. For our opening match of the main tournament, we have the defending champion, Jorg, versus the classless Dark Horse, Errol from Dragonfang. The entire stadium roars. Errol stands up, and Rai squeezes his hand for a moment, telling him quietly, "Good luck." Errol heads down to the arena floor. In the stands, Loli leans over the railing and screams at the top of her lungs for him to tear Jorg apart. But as soon as Jorg steps into the arena, Errol knows something is wrong. Jorg's eyes are glowing a sinister purple. A horn protrudes from his head. His teeth have become fangs, and the aura around him feels completely wrong, more like a monster than a man. Errol's instincts start screaming that this is no normal opponent. Up in the stands, Rod suddenly goes pale. He recognizes the sword Jorg is holding and shouts down to Errol to back away. He explains that the blade Jorg is wielding is a cursed sword with a powerful demon sealed inside. Jorg opens his mouth, and the voice that comes out is not his own. It's deeper, darker. He chuckles and says he's surprised someone managed to identify him so quickly. Loli frowns, confused, saying Jorg obviously knows who Rod is. Rod shakes his head grimly and says that it's not Jorg speaking anymore. The demon has taken over. Rod goes on to explain that the sword is the original weapon used by an ancient sword god to slay the Demon King long ago. But before dying, the Demon King cursed the blade. The weapon was supposed to be sealed in the royal treasury forever, so no one could ever wield it again. The demon laughs and introduces himself to the entire stadium as Gilda, the destroyer of mankind, a name pulled straight from history and legend. Panic ripples through the crowd. Even Rai, watching from the entrance tunnel, is stunned. She always thought Gilda was just a story told to scare children. Chaos erupts. People in the stands recognize the name and start screaming, trying to flee. A full-blown stampede begins. Gilda, however, enjoys the panic. He draws a wide, glowing magic circle beneath his feet. A massive dome of magical energy expands upward and outward, sealing the entire arena and the stands in a shimmering barrier. No one can escape. He laughs at the rising terror, claiming that the screams of humans are music to his ears, and that he plans to savor them slowly. In the middle of all that, Errol doesn't retreat. He stands in place with his sword drawn. Gilda tells him to run while he still can, but Errol says he's not going anywhere. He points out that Gilda has already been defeated once in the past, which means he's not invincible. If someone could beat him once, someone can beat him again. Gilda snarls that last time, he lost to a sword god, and according to Jorg's memories, there isn't a sword god alive in the current era. Errol calmly replies that there is one, his own mother, and even without being a sword god himself, he fully intends to take Gilda down. The demon laughs at first, but his laughter cuts off when Errol suddenly disappears from view.
In a blink, Errol dashes in with Divine Step, the same ultimate movement technique used by sword gods of legend. He appears at Gilda's flank and attacks. The demon is forced to retreat and counter. The battle becomes a furious blur. Errol keeps using Divine Step, shifting angles, striking from multiple positions. Gilda fights back, but in his mind he's shaken. This boy is clearly using sword god techniques. Eventually, Gilda reminds him that he now inhabits the body of Sword Emperor, someone who already has insane physical stats. Errol's slashes, while precise and dangerous, don't seem to be doing enough critical damage. The demon leaps and slams his blade down into Errol's shoulder, smashing him into the ground. Dust explodes. Gilda assumes it's over, but when the smoke clears, Errol is still on his feet, battered but not broken. Thanks to all his painful training with Rise reinforcement techniques, he was able to withstand the blow. Now it's his turn. Errol lunges forward, intercepts Gilda's next attack, and then unleashes Infinite Break. His sword becomes a storm of steel, striking from every angle in rapid succession. The demon staggers as cut after cut lands, overwhelmed by the sheer speed and ferocity. For a moment, Gilda is dragged back into his worst memories. He's reminded of the sword god who defeated him centuries ago. The technique, the pressure, it all feels too similar. Before he can fully recover, Errol launches one final, devastating slash that sends Gilda crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust and shattered stone. The stadium goes silent, then erupts into cheers. To everyone watching, it looks like Errol just defeated the Demon King of legend. But Errol senses something's wrong. The demon's true body was never Jorg. It's the sword itself. While Jorg's body lies broken, the blade remains intact, pulsing with malicious energy. Gilda's consciousness slips out, searching for a new host. Errol barely has time to react before the sword flies off the ground toward the stands, aiming straight at the people he cares about. He shoves Rai out of the way as the cursed sword hurtles toward Loli. At the last second, Rod throws himself in front of his daughter. When the dust settles, Rod is standing there holding the demon sword in his remaining hand, but his expression has changed. He turns, wrapping his arm around Loli's neck and holding the blade near her throat. Gilda laughs through Rod's mouth and tells Errol that if he moves even an inch, Loli dies. Errol, however, doesn't freeze. He calmly shifts his stance and says that Gilda won't be able to kill her even if he wants to. Rai panics, not understanding why Errol would provoke a demon like this. But when Gilda tries to force Rod's arm to move and slit Loli's throat, his arm doesn't budge. Errol explains that Rod is far stronger than Jorg ever was, both in willpower and swordsmanship. Possessing him isn't going to be nearly as easy. Rod grits his teeth as Gilda tries to force control over his body. The two wills clash, then Rod roars, shoves the blade away from Loli's neck, and slams the sword into the ground, fighting back against the demon's influence. Gilda howls, trying to claw his way back into control, but Rod refuses to yield. With a final surge of strength, Rod wrenches the sword free and hurls it toward Errol. Errol doesn't hesitate. He leaps up, channels everything he has into a single swing, and slashes the cursed sword to pieces. The blade shatters, and with it, Gilda's soul is finally destroyed for good. The barrier around the stadium fades. The crowd collapses in relief, and for a long moment, everyone just breathes. Errol lowers his sword, knowing that this time the demon is truly gone.
When the preliminary brackets are finally posted, Loli rushes to the board and her face drops instantly. Her name is in the same block as Errol. If they both keep winning, they'll have to fight each other, and she already knows how that would end. In her head, her chances of reaching the main tournament go from maybe to absolutely 0 in 1 second. Errol, meanwhile, is still trying to wrap his head around how this whole prelim system works. Rai patiently explains that the Sword God tournament attracts way too many swordsmen to throw them all straight into the main event. So, they split everyone into multiple blocks, assigned randomly by dice roll. Only the winner of each block gets a ticket to the real tournament. Errol leans over Loli's shoulder to read the scroll himself and notices that Rai is in a completely different group. Rai lets out a quiet sigh of relief and thanks the gods under her breath, because if she ended up fighting Errol in prelims, she knows she'd get flattened. She clasps her hands and starts praying for an easy path in her own block. Errol immediately starts teasing her for acting dramatic and jokes that she probably has dad issues on top of everything else. Rai rolls her eyes, already regretting existing near him. Before their bickering gets serious, Loli claps her hands between them and says they should head back to the dungeon for more training. Errol groans. He's had enough of dungeons for now and says he wants to skip. Loli instantly switches to her helpless girl act and clings to his arm, insisting she needs a strong man to protect her if something goes wrong on the deeper floors. Rai watches this and thinks that Loli is way too dependent on other people. She quietly vows to beat some independence into her later. Before they can step out, Rod appears in the doorway. He looks more serious than usual, walks straight to Loli and grabs her shoulder. He tells her to be extra careful, especially with Jorg still lurking somewhere in the background, plotting who knows what. Loli sees real fear in her father's eyes, so she doesn't joke this time. She calmly promises she'll be careful and heads out. Rod turns and notices Errol watching him silently from the side. Rod grumbles that he still has time to pull himself together and be the protective father he should have been all along. Errol gives him a small smile and says, "It's never too late to start being a decent person." Then he follows the girls out. A couple of weeks pass in a blur of training, dungeon runs, and prep for the tournament. Finally, the day of the preliminaries arrives. The Coliseum is packed. The seats are overflowing with spectators yelling, cheering, and betting as swordsmen clash below in showers of sparks. One by one, fighters are knocked out and carried off, and the huge crowd gradually narrows down into a few survivors. Loli fights hard, but she doesn't get the storybook run she was hoping for. She gets eliminated from her block before she even has a chance to face Errol. She sits in a shadowy corner of the waiting area, sulking hard. She had at least hoped to reach the finals this time, but reality slaps her back into place. Errol, instead of comforting her, just says in his usual flat tone that she was stressing over nothing. Even if they had met, she would have lost to him anyway. Yeah, that doesn't help. Loli looks like she's either going to cry or strangle him, but she takes a breath and pulls herself together. She warns him not to underestimate everyone just because he's strong. She tells him the other finalist in his block isn't some random scrub. She's got special tricks and won't go down easily. Errol shrugs. After all the weird skills, monsters, and traps he's seen in the dungeon, it's hard for him to imagine some normal tournament opponent genuinely surprising him. Loli shakes her head and explains that this opponent isn't just any swordsman. She's a red-haired magic swordsman, a fighter who can cast magic and channel it directly into her blade, boosting its power with mana and elemental energy. That finally gets Errol's attention. He honestly didn't expect magic to be allowed in a swordsmanship tournament. Loli explains that in this city, it doesn't matter what your class is. As long as you fight using a sword and belong to a guild, you're allowed to participate. Magic swordsmen, holy knights, power swordsmen. If you've got a blade, you're in. Soon the announcer calls for the final match of Block 4. Errol steps into the arena to the roar of the crowd. Across from him stands his opponent, a red-haired girl holding her sword in a confident, polished stance. Before the fight even starts, she announces that she's a magic swordsman and that her class is recognized in the tournament. She warns him not to whine later that the fight was unfair because she used magic. Errol calmly replies that he doesn't care what class she uses. They're here to fight, the stronger one wins. That's all that matters. The match begins. Without wasting time, she raises her hand and launches a barrage of fireballs at him. Errol bends backward, twists sideways, and slides under the blazing projectiles, slashing some in half and letting others pass just inches from his body. The crowd gasps as he weaves through flames like a shadow dancing in the middle of an explosion. But she isn't running out of mana anytime soon. She keeps up a relentless barrage, forcing him to stay in motion constantly. Eventually, he darts forward and closes the gap. He swings for her guard, but she blocks and counters with a fireball at point-blank range, forcing him to disengage. Errol starts to read her rhythm. He notes out loud that being able to swap between long-range magic and close-range sword fighting must be really convenient. She smirks and calls herself gifted, saying that a classless nobody like him could never beat her. Errol, unfazed, says that while she's good at both magic and swordsmanship, she hasn't mastered either. She's spreading herself too thin. That hits a nerve. Infuriated, she declares that she'll make him regret those words. She pours mana into her sword, and the blade erupts into flames, transforming into a burning sword. She claims that only a true magic swordsman can handle a weapon like this. With a sharp swing, she sends a flaming wave chasing after him. Errol dodges and slices through part of the fire, but her movements become more erratic and harder to predict. Even he has to work to track where the next attack is coming from. He acknowledges in his mind that she's definitely talented and has trained hard, but then he stops constantly backing away and plants his feet firmly into the ground. The next burst of flaming strikes comes screaming toward him, and Errol deflects every single one without moving from that fixed spot. Minimal movement, no panic, just razor-sharp technique. He tells her that with her talent, if she'd built a solid core in either pure swordsmanship or pure magic first, she could have been truly terrifying. But right now, she's just a bit above the generic enemies level. The comment stings. Her composure cracks, and she overcommits to her next attack. Errol instantly capitalizes. He unleashes a twin slash that slices straight through the flaming sword strike, extinguishing the magic mid-air. Before she can even process what happened, he uses Blink Step, appears behind her, and knocks her out with a clean smack of his pommel to the back of her head. She crumples to the ground. The audience explodes into cheers. The announcer shouts that Errol is the winner of Block 4. Loli and Rai stare in disbelief at how smoothly he dismantled a magic swordsman. Errol, though, is already analyzing her techniques in his head, wondering how he can adapt her magic-imbued style into his own arsenal. A few days later, the prelims are done. Now it's time for the main event, the Sword God Tournament. Early in the morning, Loli returns to the guild house to drag her father out of bed. She insists he come watch the tournament with her so they can cheer for both Errol and Rai, who each won their blocks and made it to the main stage. Rod lies there with his eyes closed and tells her to go alone. He claims he doesn't care about some flashy spectacle anymore. Loli narrows her eyes and pokes at his pride, asking if he's just scared of seeing Jorg there. That hits. Rod snaps that he's not afraid of that bastard, but then his anger drains away, and for a moment he talks honestly. He admits he tried picking up his sword again yesterday. The moment he swung it, he realized just how rusty he's become. He's not even sure he could win the Sword God Tournament anymore. Loli is stunned and then furious. She reminds him that someone like her couldn't even clear the prelims, while he still thinks of himself as too rusty to win the entire thing. She tells him to think about what that really means. Even now, when he's at his lowest, he's still far beyond the average swordsman who trains non-stop and never even sees the main stage. Her words sink in. Rod finally sighs and agrees to go. As they walk toward the stadium, he remembers the days when he still had both arms, training Rai, watching her grow, and feeling proud as her teacher. Even with one arm now, he's still deeply connected to her. Inside the tournament waiting room, Rai sits on a bench, bouncing her leg nervously, eyes glued to the floor. Errol appears beside her and casually asks if she's nervous. They might have to fight each other in the first round. Rai jumps, punches at him on reflex, and he casually catches her fist. Before she can yell, the announcer's amplified voice echoes through the arena. For our opening match of the main tournament, the defending champion, Jorg, versus the classless dark horse, Errol of Dragon Fang. The stadium goes wild. Errol stands, and Rai squeezes his hand for a second. "Good luck," she says quietly. He nods and heads out onto the arena floor. From the stands, Loli leans over the railing and screams for him to tear Jorg apart. But the moment Jorg steps into the arena, Errol freezes. Jorg's eyes glow a sickly purple. A horn juts from his forehead. His teeth have lengthened into fangs, and the aura around him is heavy and twisted. It feels less like a man and more like a monster wearing human skin.
Errol's instincts flare. This is not just a strong swordsman. Up in the stands, Rod suddenly goes pale. He recognizes the sword in Jorg's hand and shouts down for Errol to get away from him. He explains that Jorg is holding a cursed sword, sealed long ago with a powerful demon trapped inside. Jorg opens his mouth, and the voice that comes out is deeper and colder, clearly not his own. He chuckles and says he's impressed someone recognized him so quickly. Loli is confused. Jorg definitely knows who Rod is. Rod shakes his head and says it's not Jorg anymore. The demon is in control. Rod explains that this blade was once used by a sword god to kill the Demon King. But before dying, the Demon King cursed the sword. It was supposed to be locked away in the royal vault, never to see daylight again. The demon laughs and introduces himself to the entire stadium as Gilda, the destroyer of mankind. The name hits the crowd like a bomb. Panic surges through the stands. Even Rai, watching from the tunnel, is stunned. She always thought Gilda was just a bedtime horror story. People start screaming and rushing for the exits. Gilda stretches out his hand and creates a huge magic circle beneath his feet. A massive dome of magical energy erupts from the ground and encloses the entire arena and spectator stands, trapping everyone inside like bugs in a jar. He laughs at the chaos, saying the screams of humans are his favorite music and he intends to enjoy it. In the middle of the arena, Errol doesn't move. Gilda tells him to run while he still has the chance. Errol simply raises his sword and says he won't. Gilda's been defeated once already, so he can be defeated again. Gilda snarls that last time he lost to a sword god, and according to Jorg's memories, there's no sword god alive in this era. Errol replies calmly that there is a sword god alive, his mother. And even if he's not one himself, he doesn't need that title to cut a demon down. Gilda laughs at the arrogance, until Errol vanishes. In an instant, Errol reappears by his side using Divine Step, the legendary movement technique of sword gods. He slashes. Gilda is forced to retreat and parry, surprised by the speed. Their fight turns into a storm of steel and shockwaves. Errol chains Divine Step again and again, striking from different angles. Gilda blocks, counters, and deflects, but inside he's rattled. This boy is clearly using techniques he thought only sword gods could. Gilda reminds himself that he's possessing the body of a sword emperor, a monster of raw physical ability. Errol's attacks leave marks, but not enough to put him down fast. Gilda leaps and smashes his blade into Errol's shoulder, slamming him into the ground. Dust explodes. He assumes the boy is done, but when the dust clears, Errol is still standing, hurt but not broken. His training with Rai's reinforcement techniques has hardened his body enough to survive blows that would kill most swordsmen. Now it's his turn. Errol rushes in, intercepts Gilda's next strike, and unleashes Infinite Break. His sword becomes a blur, carving through the air from every direction. Gilda staggers as blow after blow rains down on him, the pressure reminding him of the sword god who once brought him to his knees. Overwhelmed, Gilda barely has time to think before Errol finishes with a brutal final slash that sends him crashing into the arena floor. The stadium holds its breath, then erupts into cheers. To them, it looks like Errol just defeated the Demon King of Legend. But Errol doesn't relax. He knows the demon's real body was never Jorg. It's the sword. Jorg's body lies broken, but the blade still pulses with dark energy. Gilda's consciousness slips free and shoots through the air, looking for a new host. The sword rockets toward the stands, straight for the people Errol cares about. Errol dives, shoving Rai out of its path. At the last second, Rod throws himself in front of Loli. When the dust settles, Rod is standing there, gripping the demon sword in his remaining hand. But his eyes aren't normal. He twists around, wrapping his arm around Loli's neck and holding the blade at her throat. Gilda's voice comes out of Rod's mouth, laughing as he tells Errol that if he so much as flinches, Loli dies. Errol doesn't freeze. He calmly shifts his stance and says Gilda won't be able to kill her, even if he wants to. Rai panics, not understanding why Errol would provoke a possessed swordsman. But when Gilda tries to move Rod's arm and slice Loli's throat, the arm doesn't move. Errol explains that Rod is far stronger than Jorg ever was, in both skill and willpower. Possessing him isn't going to be that easy. Inside, Rod and Gilda clash head-on. Rod's teeth grind as he fights the demon's influence, refusing to let go of control. Then Rod roars, forces the blade away from his daughter's neck, and slams the sword into the ground. trying to pin the demon down.
Gilda howls inside his mind, but Rod doesn't break. With one final push, he tears the sword free from his own grip and hurls it toward Errol. Errol doesn't hesitate. He jumps, channels everything into one final strike, and slashes the cursed sword apart. The blade shatters into glittering fragments, and with it, Gilda's soul is destroyed. The shimmering barrier around the stadium fades like mist. People drop to their knees, shaking with relief. For a long moment, no one speaks. They just breathe. Errol lowers his sword, finally sure of one thing. This time, the demon is gone for good. Ray now spends every day training under Errol's mom, both as a swordsman and as a future housewife. One morning, Errol's mom gives her a simple mission: make the tea. Ray treats it like a life or death exam, measuring leaves, timing the boil, checking the color over and over before finally serving it with shaking hands. Errol's mom takes a sip, thinks for a moment, then says it's perfect. Ray's whole face lights up. Her happiness is cut short by a scream from upstairs. It's Errol's little sister, Mira. She says Errol's gone. His bed is empty, and only a note remains. I'm going to Arsbel, the city of magic, for training. Errol's mom falls quiet. She expected him to leave someday, but not without saying goodbye. Mira bursts into tears, and Ray is hit with guilt, remembering how she once ran off to the sword city of Bresta without thinking about her own family. Errol's mom tells Ray she doesn't want her to vanish like that too. Ray promises she won't. She still has a lot to learn here. Still, Errol's mom can't help thinking her eldest daughter left. Now Errol is gone again. When will she see all her children together? Meanwhile, Errol is already on the road, riding a familiar cart out of the village with the same knight-turned-coachman who once took him to Bresta. The man is surprised to see him and asks where he's headed now. Errol says he's going to Arsbel to take the Magic Academy entrance exam. The driver estimates a 2-day trip. On the way, he comments that Errol is strange. He went to the sword capital, stunned everyone with his strength, then threw the fame away to return to an unknown village. He vanished for 3 years, and now he's suddenly off to the greatest magic city in the region. Errol just shrugs and says he wants to see how he compares against real mages. From behind, a young red-haired boy pops his head forward and asks if Errol is also an exam candidate. He's surprised someone that old is taking the test. Before Errol can answer, a blue-haired girl scolds him and assumes Errol is a pathetic repeat taker who's been failing for years. She even calls it admirable that someone so weak keeps trying. A green-haired girl tries to calm them, but the two keep arguing. The red boy proudly says he specializes in red magic, which reminds Errol of his father's old lesson: black for dark, white for light, yellow for earth, green for wind, blue for water, red for fire. Since Errol never had a natural affinity, his father let him experiment with all magic instead of locking him into one. Back in the present, Errol tells the boy he doesn't know his specialty because he doesn't have a class at all. The boy is stunned. The blue girl calls him a liar, saying a classless person couldn't even dream of sitting the exam. The boy accuses Errol of making fun of them until Errol calmly pulls out his class card. The crystal clearly reads classless. All 3 kids are shocked and insist there's no way someone like him can pass. Before the argument can go further, a deafening roar echoes through the forest. Trees shake, birds scatter. Errol instantly recognizes it as a troll king. The red-haired boy panics, saying they need to flee. The blue girl orders the driver to move, but he turns around pale and says the horses have fainted from fear. There's no escape. The blue girl steels herself and says they have to fight. She tries to strategize, saying a troll is still a troll, big, slow, and beatable if they work together. That confidence disappears when the Troll King steps out of the trees, massive club in hand, strong enough to crush them in one blow. Trying to act brave, the red boy jumps down, pulls out his wand, and fires all his mana into a single fireball straight at the troll's face. For a moment, it looks promising, until the smoke clears and the Troll King walks out completely unharmed and furious. The boy is out of mana, out of options, and the troll charges. Just before the giant club lands, a huge explosion shakes the area. The Troll King is obliterated, reduced to ash in an instant. Errol steps forward from behind, scratching his head and mumbling that he might have gone a little overboard. The blue and green girls whisper in disbelief. Explosion magic is something only elite mages can manage, and even they don't casually use it in the middle of a road. Ignoring their reactions, Errol walks over to the horses and quietly casts a healing spell to wake and restore them. When he turns back, the red-haired boy is on his knees. He begs Errol's forgiveness and asks to become his disciple, swearing he wants to be a great wizard. Errol tries to explain that he's not some grandmaster, just another exam candidate, and shows his class card again. The green-haired girl decides that must be a fake to hide his true identity. Unable to fix the misunderstanding, Errol just drops it and continues toward Arsbel with them. 2 days later, they arrive at Arsbel, the city of magic. The city sits in the middle of a vast lake, connected to the land by drawbridges like spokes on a wheel. As they cross, Errol sees tall mage towers, floating lanterns, and glowing magic circles etched into stone streets. Inside, the red-haired boy cheerfully declares he'll join the red magic course and expects Errol to do the same after seeing his fire magic. The blue and green girls intend to take the water and wind exams. Errol learns that the academy is divided by magic affinity, each with its own exam. He worries they'll reject him at the desk the same way the guilds in Bresta did, for being classless. Instead, when he hands his card to the receptionist, she simply smiles, stamps it, and gives him his exam number. When he asks if being classless is a problem, she says everyone has the right to take the exam, no discrimination allowed. That alone tells him this city is nothing like Bresta. Errol heads first to the red magic test. Candidates stand before a mithril knight dummy, each casting a basic fire spell. A kid fires a small fireball, barely scorching the armor, and the examiner passes him. Then the doors swing open, and a flashy red-haired boy strolls in. The examiner checks his card and stiffens. He's an advanced magic user, an extremely rare class. The boy steps up and calls down a towering pillar of flame over the mithril knight. When the flames fade, the knight is still standing, only lightly heated. The boy looks satisfied anyway. The red-haired cart kid can't help himself and loudly claims that Errol could easily do better. The advanced magic user takes offense, demanding to know if he thinks some random man could surpass him. The kid brags again about Master Errol, so Errol finally steps forward and notes that the knight didn't even melt. The examiner reminds them that the knights are made of mithril, one of the hardest metals in the world. Dragged into it, Errol sighs, knocks the cart kid on the head, and steps into the arena. He uses the same eruption spell, but compresses it into a narrow, focused spike of fire rather than a showy pillar. It looks unimpressive at first, until the mithril knight slowly collapses into a puddle of molten metal. Silence. The advanced magic user blurts out that eruption magic shouldn't be able to melt mithril. Errol explains that he modified the spell, condensing the flames to skyrocket the temperature instead of spreading them out for visual effect. Without waiting for praise, he leaves and walks straight into the blue magic exam, where the blue-haired girl has just passed her own test by hitting the target with a water spell. She's stunned to see him there. Errol simply casts Ice Edge, freezing and shattering his knight in one move, then moves on again. Next is the green magic test. Outside, he finds the green-haired girl too scared to even register. He gives her a straightforward pep talk, walks her to the desk, and gets her signed up. The test is simple. Generate a basic wind spell to spin a windmill. When it's his turn, Errol, as usual, overdoes it and summons a mini tornado that completely obliterates the windmill. The instructor is speechless. The girl's anxiety spikes, but Errol calms her again and encourages her onto the platform. This time she produces a neat wind spell, spins the replacement windmill, and passes it. He then goes on to pass the light and earth exams with similar ease. Finally, he heads toward the dark magic school. Unlike the others, it looks almost deserted. No lines, no noise, just a quiet, eerie building. As he approaches, he hears something squirming in a wooden box. Before he can check, a woman appears, frantic about her missing pet. Errol points to the box, and she pulls out a bizarre chimera toad thing and lovingly calls it cute, saying she made it herself. Errol forces a polite smile. Suddenly, a skeleton jumps up behind him. His instincts kick in, and he reflexively chops its head off. The skeleton calmly retrieves its skull, puts it back on, and introduces herself as Lada, a clerk for the dark magic section. She says the dark magic school is always open because almost nobody applies. With that, Errol is accepted into all 6 magic schools. When he leaves the building, the 3 kids from the cart rush him. Each argues that since he took their elements test, he must be joining their magic school. Errol ends the debate in one line. He tells them he passed all 6 exams and plans to learn every single magical affinity from now on. The 3 of them are completely stunned into silence. Errol still can't believe he managed to get a student ID from all 6 magic schools. He figures the schools probably don't share student data, so crazy loopholes like this exist. Now that he's passed all the entrance exams and finished the paperwork, there's only one big problem left: class schedules. He worries the different schools' timetables will overlap, and Kaido, the red boy, yells that he already warned him this would happen. Errol just shrugs and says each course only needs 20% attendance anyway. As long as he shows up sometimes and gets good grades in the finals, the teachers shouldn't complain. The green girl, Colette, doesn't agree. She reminds him that teachers share the newest information in class and that he can't score well if he never takes notes. Errol asks if he can just borrow notes from them instead. The group agrees, but they're curious about the remaining schools. Errol explains that the Black Magic School has no fixed schedule and most students just self-study, so that one is easy. Now he only needs to focus on the yellow and white schools to pass exams in all 6. While Kaido fully trusts Errol's insane plan, the blue-green girl, Kufa, is doubtful. She pulls Colette aside and whispers that most students can't even handle 2 schools at once. So how is Errol going to manage 6? Errol starts with the red school, attending class with Kaido. There, the arrogant boy from the entrance exam, Royce, spots him and freaks out. He confronts Errol, insisting that their previous result was just a fluke and that a real mage like him would never lose to a mere spellcaster. Errol calmly says he isn't a spellcaster at all. Royce misunderstands, assuming Errol is another mage like him, then even imagines him as some legendary archmage. Errol denies it every time, which only confuses Royce further. Before they can argue more, the teacher arrives and checks the register. To everyone's shock, he announces that Errol is classless. Royce's brain basically crashes. Class begins, and the magic script has gotten so complex that Kaido struggles to follow along. Errol, however, finds it ridiculously easy and wonders why they're still learning such basic stuff. The teacher explains that most students don't even know the grammar of magic script yet, and mastering it is crucial for strong spellcasting. He adds that, at an advanced level, students can even rearrange spell formulas to boost their power. Kaido realizes that's exactly what Errol did before, and is stunned to learn it's considered a high-level technique. Later, Errol heads to the green school with high expectations. He tells Colette that none of the schools so far have taught him anything new, but he's excited because the green school will start with flight magic. Colette is surprised. She thought a prodigy like him would already know how to fly. He admits his dad is terrified of heights, so that's the one thing he never learned. The flight teacher tells everyone to imagine riding an upward current of air and to balance by spreading their arms, assuming they all already have the flight skill. Colette manages to float but loses control and crashes, getting laughed at by the others. She shrugs it off and keeps practicing, and her confidence inspires Errol. He still can't imagine a gentle air current lifting him, so he goes extreme. He creates a mini tornado at his feet. It launches him into the sky, only for him to crash back down and leave a crater in the ground. As Colette helps him up, a green-haired boy arrives and mocks them as losers. To show off, he rises smoothly into the air and flies with perfect control. He proudly says he's trained only flight magic his whole life and has never lost a race. Colette explains to Errol that there are flight races on a set course, and the boy has won them all. Immediately, Errol declares he's entering the next race. The boy laughs and points out that Errol can't even fly yet, and that proper flight takes at least 6 months to learn. The next race is in 2 months. Colette suggests Errol just join next year, but he's already planning how to win now. A few days later, Colette, Kufa, and Kaido sneak into school at night because Colette forgot something. Kaido complains that they didn't need him, until Kufa mentions rumors of a ghost flying around the campus. Kaido, who's terrified of ghosts, freaks out. While they argue, a shadowy figure flies toward the window. Kaido and Kufa panic, but the figure opens the window, covers Colette's mouth, and slips inside. It turns out to be Errol, who's been practicing flight magic at night. His friends realize he's the ghost everyone saw. They tell him to rest more, but Errol calmly explains that he already sleeps plenty. In fact, he's trained his body to keep practicing spells even while he's asleep because he hates wasting time doing nothing. His friends think he's completely crazy, but they can't help feeling motivated to work harder. Since he's wide awake now, Errol heads straight to the Black Magic School. Lada is thrilled to see him. He asks for access to the library, saying he reads every book he can find because even creepy black magic grimoires have valuable information. Lada is impressed as most people are scared just hearing the words Black Magic Book. Back in the Red School, Errol later corrects a spell formula the teacher wrote wrong on the board. He explains that, since he can't rely on skills, he memorizes all spells and even shortens the long ones to make them easier to remember. The teacher, Baldy, is shocked when Errol cuts the spell length almost in half. He warns that this version has no safety buffers and could explode if the caster can't perfectly control their mana. Errol just says his divine protection will keep him alive, and he doesn't mind a little pain. Baldy is impressed and offers Errol a promotion exam to jump to 2nd grade. Royce also begs to take the exam, so Baldy lets both join. In the test corridor, a monster is released from a cage at the end. They have to defeat it before it reaches Royce goes first, fights a Minotaur, and panics. His eruption spell keeps missing, and the beast charges closer and closer. Just when it's about to reach him, it suddenly disappears, teleported away by the exam safeguard. Royce fails, but Baldy tells him he actually did well for his level and needed this reality check. Royce finally realizes he's not as strong as he thought and decides to train seriously. Then it's Errol's turn, but due to a mix-up, a superior Minotaur appears instead of a normal one, something meant for elite second-grade students. Errol attacks its legs with flame spears, but it dodges easily. Baldy tries to stop the exam, worried the teleport trap might not hold this monster. Errol refuses to quit, saying it can only dodge attacks it can see. His flame spears suddenly curve mid-air and hit the Minotaur from behind, dropping it. He then finishes it off with an eruption spell, leaving nothing behind. Baldy is stunned. Errol just passed an elite level test. He immediately promotes Errol to second grade. Later, Kaido brags about Errol's achievements to the girls, acting like a proud manager. Errol, however, isn't satisfied. Passing one school isn't enough. He wants promotion in all of them. His friends are shocked, but at this point they know that's just how Errol is. From there, Errol keeps pushing forward, provoking the near Archmage Blue teacher into a mock battle and beating her with overwhelming ice magic, winning the Green School's huge flight race against senior students to meet the headmaster, building a custom metal golem called Alpha to crush Professor Rag's Earth golems in front of the entire assembly, clearing an undead-filled dungeon for the light magic promotion, and even accidentally freeing a demon from an ancient dark grimoire, only to beat it in an anti-magic zone with pure physical combat and force it into a servitude contract. He names the demon Maddie and adds him to his strange little group. 6 months later, the Grand Festival arrives along with the Battle of the Six Schools, where each magic type fights to prove its strength. Kaido and the others argue over which school Errol will represent, while Maddie explains that he can only choose one kind of magic for the competition. Errol decides he'll visit each headmaster, show his power, and then choose. And that's where this part ends. Right before Errol decides which magic he'll use to shock the entire academy in the Battle of the Six Schools.